It's Children's Mental Health Week, and we're exploring the power of paying attention to what's going on inside, discovering clues from our thoughts, our feelings, and our bodies. Hello, I'm Kathryn Lovewell, author of the Inner Detective Journal, a gentle guide to help young children make sense of their inner world, especially when life feels difficult. We are shining a light on the importance of children's mental health, so every child has the opportunity to learn skills to respond to themselves kindly when things go wrong, which they inevitably will. So let's hear from one of our special guests now. To complete Children's Mental Health Week and to mark the launch of our Children's Inner Detective Journal, we are beyond delighted to be joined by a truly special guest, all the way from the USA. Dr. Rick Hanson is a world-leading expert in positive neuroplasticity and the creator of positive neuroplasticity training. His work has profoundly shaped how we understand the developing brain and how children can learn to build inner strength, confidence, and kindness. It's a real privilege to have Rick join us to share his expertise today. So a very warm welcome, Rick.
Kathryn, I feel deeply honored to be here. I feel very respectful and appreciative of all those who are present as well as we explore this sacred power that we all have within ourselves, including within children, to guide who we are becoming in ways that are grounded in modern science and appreciated in the living body. What a wonderful topic. And to be able to guide children with the Inner Detective Journal, etc., I just think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, your bio is exceptionally long, but for those that are new to your work, can you just sum up some of the magic you've done over decades?
Oh, no big deal. Let's keep it short and focus on the good stuff. Like a lot of people, I started out with an awareness of suffering, mostly that of other people when I was a little child, and increasingly my own. And then that motivated me in my own journey that has lived a lot at the intersection of three circles of clinical psychology, brain science, and contemplative practice. And so I'm especially interested in what are the practical tools that can be found there at a time when we feel so pushed around by external forces that we can tap into from the inside out ourselves, grounded in real science, to gently develop increasingly whatever we want to grow inside, to grow the good that lasts. So that's my background, and I'm really happy to be here.
Grow the good that lasts. That's exactly what we want to do. And we want to help our youngest children and all the grown-ups that are taking care of those young children to really help develop those skills that then are sustainable throughout their adult life. So my first juicy question for you, from a brain perspective, what really helps protect children's mental health as they grow up?
It's a twofold process. One, minimize injuries coming in. The developing brain is very vulnerable. It's highly plastic in the sense that it's creating all kinds of new connections at a very rapid rate, and it's not well regulated yet. So things that happen from the outside, like the impact of poverty and other sorts of systemic forces, as well as things like, neglect and abuse, they really make a difference. So that's one thing for us to really pay attention to. The second thing that we can really pay attention to is to draw on the primal soothing system in the body. And this is where the work of Professor Paul Gilbert and others is really important, Steve Porges and so as well, to realize that we are profoundly social mammals. We're big social monkeys, and supporting healthy connections that are experienced by the child with other people, including with peers and certainly with adults and formal and informal caregivers, is also really important because it creates a kind of container and protective buffers inside the developing brain. So those would be the two. And then if I could add a bonus, it would be to start helping kids realize, even at a very young age, and I've done this with preschoolers literally, at a very young age, that they have influence over how they think and feel. Like really, they can influence who they are becoming, which children really like realizing because, of course, they don't like being bossed around by all those big people. And to realize, you can identify as a kid. You can identify something that feels good in you, like the comfort of a snuggle with a parent, or realizing that you're still a good person even if you could not score a goal in football or something. Whenever you're feeling something good, you can stay with it. You can soak it in, and you can kind of put that jewel in the treasure chest in your heart so that you increasingly, from the inside out, are hardwiring that way of being into yourself increasingly. You have the power, kiddo, to be able to do that. And when kids realize that, it's like a light bulb moment for them. So that would be the third thing I would add. And in a way, long term, it's the most important one of all, because as teachers know, learning is the superpower of superpowers. It's the strength we use to grow all the other strengths. In the same way, kids learning so that they can grow the inner strengths of resilience, of mindfulness, of compassion, of self-worth, and happiness altogether. When they realize I have the power to grow that, that's the superpower of superpowers inside themselves.
I 100% concur, absolutely. And we talk about having that inner remote control that they can choose. That's what we call it. So I'm very curious, as you know, with the Inner Detective Journal, we've got those two characters, Booster and Crusher. And Crusher is that mean inner critical voice. And I'm very curious to get your perspective about how those repeated thoughts, those negative repeated thoughts, can shape a brain's child over time. What happens, Rick?
It's really interesting that one of the most negative factors in the development of psychopathology is negative rumination. And we're very vulnerable. You know, chimpanzees don't ruminate. They don't have the cognitive capacity, even though they are our closest biological relative. Chimpanzees and bonobos, they don't ruminate. They're in the present. Humans have this ability to reflect on the past and imagine a future, which is a wonderful adaptation, but it also enables us to ruminate. And when we ruminate, neurons that fire together wire together, which deepens and reinforces those neurological tracks, which are intensified by the brain's negativity bias, which makes it like Velcro for bad experiences, but Teflon for good ones. And so negative rumination, getting caught up in Crusher, listening to Crusher all the time, feeding Crusher, empowering Crusher, believing Crusher, identifying with Crusher is a form of really negative rumination. And one of the best things a kid can do, and I'll give you a little neurological hack here, there are two really good ways to disrupt activity in the ruminator, which involves midline cortical activation, mainly in the rearward portion of the so-called default mode network. Number one, lift your gaze to the horizon. Get a sense of the bigger picture. That right there is like a circuit breaker deactivating the ruminator. It shuts off power to the ruminator because the ruminator is very involved with preoccupation with parts, with one thing or another. If you lift your gaze to the horizon, or more generally get a sense of the space you're in, the bird's eye view, the bigger picture, the volume of the room, these are just different ways into it, that pulls you out of that fixation on preoccupation. That's a cool neurological hack. And there's another one.
Very cool. That's very, very, and so simple, and can be done in a classroom, can be done at home, like anywhere.
Yeah. The other one is what's called interoception. If you ask a child, let's say, to just, hey, let's follow the sense of one breath and see if you can notice that it's a little cooler coming in and a little warmer going out. That process of interoception engages a part of the brain called the insula, which reduces activity in the default mode network, and thus disrupts and depowers the ruminator. And then it's really important to not just pull weeds in the garden of your mind, but plant flowers. And then, now that you've released and you've created some space, Crusher, bye-bye, Crusher, see you later. No, Booster, come on in. Let's hang with Booster. And the more time you clock with Booster, the more you're reinforcing that neural circuitry.
Magical. You see, it's so exciting to hear the science behind why this works. And because some parents say, well, it's quite simple, isn't it? It's really, and I said, don't confuse it for simplistic. There's huge amounts of complexity behind this. So thank you. I love those hacks. Creating that wonderful perspective, just that lift up. I can feel it in my body. It's really great. Thank you. All right. So Moving on, knowing who's watching, we're going to have lots of different adults that are caring for children, whether that's in foster care, in education, or at home.
Mm.
How do the words, the tone, the emotional presence of adults influence a child's nervous system and brain wiring?
There's a ton of material about what's called co-regulation these days and dysregulation. And I think that on the one hand, it's really important to appreciate that as big social monkeys, we have a lot of influence over each other. On the other hand, I think sometimes people are so caught up in the regulation that can occur through other people that they lose track of the ways that children can indeed develop strengths, including very young ones, of self-regulation on their own or by being involved with the object world, like making things. Making art is a form of self-regulation, being out in nature, doing athletics, doing sports, or even just reflecting on their own processes, which kids increasingly, certainly by 6 or 10 years old, can do more and more on their own. So both are really great. Externally provided regulation and the cultivation internally of self-regulation. There's tons of science about that. One of the, I think, really neat aspects of that probably a lot of people listening are familiar with involves the so-called vagus nerve complex. And the simple version of this is that it has essentially 2 branches originating in the brainstem. One is the primal ancient descending branch of the vagus nerve complex, which regulates the viscera, especially the heart and the lung. Then there's the ascending branch that's more recent, that's very involved in what's called the social engagement system. The point being, the 2 are connected. If a child is dysregulated emotionally and their heart's pounding or they feel frozen, whatever it might be, positive social contact involving the recent ascending branch of the vagus nerve complex can gradually ripple down into the descending branch and calm the heart and lungs and body-mind. Going the other way, that's how social support can literally lower blood pressure. Going the other way, sometimes kids, they're just so triggered that talking to them or touching them in a kind way or being part of a group, they can't handle it yet. They're too flooded and we're moving too quickly. We need to, for me, I kind of visualize a panicky horse. You don't just start dragging it around. You slow it down, you soothe it, maybe you touch it, you're helping it. And so ways of helping the body of the child to calm down can be really helpful. Like comforting touch, tending to warmth, because we tend to get chilled when we're upset. Helping a child be in a setting that feels really comfortable and safe. Working on the body can then enable that child to be more accessible. Start in the lower descending branch, and then the effects ripple up into the ascending branch in terms of social engagement. Then the child can be more accessible to interpersonal contact.
Beautiful. And of course, that recognizes that language may not be accessible depending on the age of the child, but if they are really upset and dysregulated, they may not have access to their words anyway. And that's why what you're sharing is so powerful and important.
And a part of it is when we're triggered, when we're reactivated, typically we're kind of frozen in some way. And often there's a reactivation of trauma material, which is about being stuck in a really horrible situation. Inherently, you're stuck. If you could escape, it wouldn't be so traumatic. If you could fight back and defeat the challenge, it would not be so traumatic. It's because you're, in effect, helpless. You can't do it. So I really think that looking for opportunities for agency, even in a young child, and for them to experience their own agency can be really helpful in breaking up kind of a gridlock. Like, for example, giving a child a choice. Would you like this or that really nice thing? That's agency. Or let's get out of the room. Let's go for a little walk. Which way do you want to go? Left or right? Here or there? Anything that breaks up the sense of frozenness and reinforces the sense in the child that you do have some power in some regards. Maybe you don't have power here or there. You can't make them do this. You can't change that, so forth. You don't have power about that, but you have an inherent sacred power to do one thing or another, and emphasizing the sense of the child as having, resourcefulness of their own, reclaiming their sense of potency And kindling that and lighting that ember is so crucial, because when that ember of self-efficacy is a fancy term for it these days, self-efficacy, when that ember is out, we can try to give influence and give help. And I say this as someone who's also worked with a lot of adults. The person's not on their own side. That ember is out. It's not lit. But once we get that ember glowing there, even if it's way down deep, then we can add fuel to it and build from there. And that ember of self-efficacy, the sense of yourself as, being a cause, at least in some ways in this life, not entirely.
Yes. And I think that really ties into that sense of empowerment that we are, through the Booster Way, really trying to encourage, that they can choose the crusher pathway or the booster pathway, that in that moment, in that situation where things are difficult, that they can choose to respond. They can move towards love, or they can see it as a threat and react, and then go down, feel helpless going down Crusher's pathway. I really love how you've explained that even very young, our children can ignite that in themselves. It's incredibly powerful. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So we're nearly there. I know we need to close soon, but from a neuroscience perspective, Rick, what does neuroscience show us about this kindness, this self-compassion, these skills that we've obviously been exploring in the journal? What does neuroscience show us about kindness and self-compassion as skills the brain can learn? So it's about that ability to learn.
Yeah. Well, as context, for thousands of years, including many thousands of years before the historical record emerged 5,000 years ago, people like you and I and our children and the people watching here did various things to train the mind and help themselves cope better with life and to experience more well-being and more love for others along the way. They were able to do that long before neuroscience emerged. So I think it's appropriate, even as a hardcore brain guy, to have a lot of humility about this and to realize that you don't need a MRI or an EEG to realize deep in your heart that it's better for you and others if you choose a path of love rather than a path of hate. You don't need an MRI to realize that the path of Booster is a lot better for you than the path of Crusher. All that said, it is really useful to explore where brain science does add value. And one place it adds value is that it's very motivating. People realize, in children, see, again, we tell kids what to do all the time, right? They blow us off. Yeah. But when you explain to them, as I've done many, many times, hey, it's up to you. But those people out there, the grown-ups, your parents, the teachers, those other jerky kids, they're changing your brain all day long. Are you going to let them do that? Or are you going to be the boss of your brain? Are you going to decide for yourself what you're trying to grow there? It's your garden. They're planting all kinds of weeds in there. Do you want to slow that down? And do you want to plant more flowers? Up to you. Whoa, that's motivating. It's not airy-fairy anymore. It's not la-di-da. It's like, whoa, my brain. And there's something weirdly fascinating. I'll draw pictures of it. I might even show, this is what a brain looks like, this kind of gushy 3 pounds of, oozing cauliflower-looking tofu-like tissue. But, yeah, it's amazing. And then they get into the sense of wonder about it. So the motivational aspect is actually really useful. And then it's actually helpful to appreciate some of the circuitry, some of the wiring diagrams. For example, if someone is being self-compassionate, in self-compassion, bringing compassion to yourself is an identifying of where it hurts. If you have compassion for others, you have empathy for their suffering, combined with caring. The combination, empathy plus caring, and the motivation to help, that equals compassion. Applying that to yourself, now, as you identify where it hurts, you, generally speaking, are lowering activity in the alarm bell of the brain, the amygdala. Just the naming, the identifying. Oh, sad. Oh, mad. Oh, shocked. Oh, want to hit somebody. So unfair. My brother took my truck. Something. As soon as you start naming that, the alarm bell's getting quieter, and parts of your brain that are more like the executive regions behind the forehead, kind of the wise, clear, chair of the committee, inside your brain, is getting more active when you just identify and name what is hurting. Right there is an example of how that works. And a key aspect of compassion that I want to emphasize based on brain science is to realize that compassion is bittersweet, You're aware of what hurts, but you're bringing the sweet of the caringness. It's very important to bring a lot of sweet, because otherwise people can get flooded, whether it's others suffering or your own. People can get flooded by the pain there. And so it's really important, and they can have what's called empathy burnout. But there's not compassion burnout, because if you keep turning up the volume of the sweet, the caring, the warm-heartedness, the tender concern, the wish to help, the sense of justice and loyalty on their behalf that you feel, or on your own behalf, as you turn up the volume of those sweet factors, then you're increasing activity of different neurochemicals in your brain that are protective and help to protect you against getting overwhelmed by the bitter suffering aspects, whether it's in others or in yourself. And realizing that in terms of how the brain works is a very helpful way to underline the importance of bringing to bear the caringness, when you're grappling with something that's painful.
That's absolutely phenomenal. And of course, it applies to children really very young. It's still going to be happening. And obviously, as the children grow older into teens and then into adulthood, it's still going to have the same effect.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
To
me, the end of the day is to realize with great humility and gratitude that 600 million years of evolution of the nervous system has endowed us with this extraordinary human brain. And it was given to us. The build-out instructions were given to us in the moment of our conception in terms of our DNA. And this is a marvelous gift. What shall we do with it? It's our responsibility to shape who we are becoming. And to gradually, a few minutes a day really is a lot of inner practice for most people. A few minutes a day. That's what we're really talking about here. And think about all the, kind of yucky ways we spend a few minutes here and a few minutes there, me included, doom scrolling this, watching some stupid thing that, ruminating unproductively about this or that. But just a few minutes a day of, for me, the overarching structure, briefly, I know we're finishing up, is to let be, let go, and let in. Those 3 steps, letting be, letting go, and letting in, summarize 90+% of all the psychospiritual tools and practices there are. The primary one is to let be. So if we just spend a few minutes a day being real with ourselves about what it's like to be oneself, and in a way that's accepting and compassionate, that itself is really foundational. And then gently releasing, saying, bye-bye, crusher. See you later, dude. I know you're trying to help me, but wow, you're over the top. Once in a while you're okay, but it's way too much right now. Letting it go, and then letting in, looking for what you want to grow inside yourself, and then just help your attention rest in it for a breath or 2 or 3 or longer. Yo, Booster, what's it feel like? Booster, what's it feel like for me to be Booster? Who am I identifying with? Am I identifying with Crusher? Not so good. Am I identifying with Booster? Booster and I, like that. Boom, you have that power. Letting be, letting go, and letting in. A few minutes a day. On any given day, it's a little thing. But as soon as you start orienting this way, it changes your whole life. And then day after day after day, hardwiring by hardwiring, synapse by synapse, you are gradually changing the underlying structure and function of your own brain, embedded in your own living body, and in ways that are letting go of crankiness, upset, trauma even, and growing resilience, happiness, love, social skills, executive function, secure attachment, and all the other good things we'd like to develop in others and in ourselves.
Rick, that's truly phenomenal. Thank you for explaining all of that. Thank you for giving us some amazing hacks. Thank you for clarifying how we can support our children and empower them to support themselves, to respond to those difficult moments with love, with very simple practices that can really support them and give them that inner strength and that grounding to know they're okay just as they are.
That's right.
I love that. Let be, let go, let in. Gorgeous. Rick, I know that I could talk to you all day, and I know
Same.
everyone watching will have so deeply appreciated you sharing your expertise. And maybe one day we'll come back together again and go for part 2. But for now, thank you for celebrating Children's Mental Health Week with us. Thank you for celebrating the Inner Detective Journal launch. That's very special to us. Thank you for really helping us understand the complexities, but also the exquisite simplicity in which we can support ourselves and our children through Booster and Crusher and through this lovely understanding that you've shared with us today. So 1,000 thanks. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have you found this curious conversation helpful? The Inner Detective Journal might be just what you need. It's a gentle, powerful way to help young children build lifelong coping skills with kindness from within. Click the link to get your copy for your child, your class, maybe your entire organization if they've got children, so you can help them through the tough times. Let's keep listening and keep supporting children's mental health together.